Hello, good morning. Can I first start with an apology about the name, yeah? In this company, I feel a bit about it being called social prescribing. People are, I'm stuck with it, okay? So I'm hoping that during the presentation, you'll see that I actually have a wider view of names and what's in a name, as they say. This is the name of the social prescribing project that I work on. It's based in just north of Swansea Centre in the Cwmtawe GP cluster. Is there anyone from that area here? Oh, right, okay, so I can't say what I want. It's a great place, great place. You can tell I'm not from Wales, so I hope the accent comes across okay. So before we start, I'd like to just draw you away from the medical side of things for 20 minutes. I'm not medically trained. I like to say to as many people as possible that I bring the community into the GP surgery, because then I get off the hook. Despite me starting every single new consultation with a referrer or a patient with these words, I am not medically trained. They usually spend at least the first 10 or 15 minutes telling me all their conditions, all their medication, and I just sit and smile, okay? So I would never claim that I have anything else. So just to get you in the zone, the clue's in the title, really. Well-being, well-being. Being well, self-care, what does it mean to you? If somebody asked you to describe your state of well-being, how would you describe it to yourself? Do you think you have good well-being? Would you comment that somebody else doesn't seem to have good well-being? I think it's something that I'm really interested in. Obviously, that's why I'm doing this job. But I think that well-being, that you'll correct me if I'm wrong, I know. I don't think there's a pill or a tablet yet for well-being, is there? So I might have a job for a little bit longer. For me, well-being is self-care and keeping your level of resilience up, so that good well-being is being able to deal with the things that life throws at you, basically. So another question for you is, what's your method of looking after yourself, your well-being? What's your regime? If you think about it, it's a very personal thing, isn't it? Some people say they look after themselves with something called retail therapy. That couldn't be further from my... when I pack to go away, I spend more time thinking about what books I'm going to read than what clothes I'm going to wear, and the idea of going shopping. But anyway, so if I'm sitting in front of somebody who's suffering at the moment, their well-being isn't good, it wouldn't be for me to say, well, there's books on prescription, go and read those. The knack of understanding well-being is that to understand how individual it is. And here I want to just dispel another misunderstood part of what I do, is that I don't have a list that I give people. I'm often asked if certain groups, organizations, training companies, can they be added to my list? And I'm thinking, well, what? I haven't got a list. I talk to the person in front of me, and we find a list to what they do. It's something called co-production. We do it together. Okay, I facilitate what they do. So, bearing this in mind with your well-being, when your well-being is poor, do you feel a slight disconnect? I think it's fair to say that most of us, when we're not doing that well, we withdraw slightly to a lot. And social prescribing in the GP surgeries is very, very helpful for people in that situation. So in case you still don't know what social prescribing is, I've got a bit of a explanation for you. It's a service connecting people to non-medical sources that will enable them to improve their health and well-being by focusing on ways to strengthen resilience and self-care. So there you go. That's what I've just spent the first few minutes saying. This project and the idea of social prescribing was very new in the area that it started in. So we had to try and explain it to people and to GPs in a way that that they understood. There's been some ups and downs, but we're getting there. So just as a very brief list, it works best for people with mild temporary mental health problems. So there's the local primary care mental health team. They're my best friends. We've built a really good relationship there because we were finding that GPs sometimes weren't sure whether to refer people to them or to me. So we've worked together and we discuss referrals and we feed back where we can. I'll say again, I'm not medically trained. I would not pretend to be. So I always say is people that could access activities in the community on their own in a normal state of being. Not somebody that perhaps needs a support worker or something like that. So people in different phases of their low well-being could access social prescribing or the mental health team. Bereavement, chronic illness, carer responsibilities, isolation and loneliness. These are all things that you're all very aware of as being big causes of people going to see their GP or you guys if you sit in the surgery. It's hard, it's hard to, there's so many stories. I'm going to move on because I'll get to some stories in a minute. Right, so, yes. So this social prescribing thing, right, it comes in many forms and it has many names. So, we're going to relax about the name now. In England, for example, they're 2 to 3 years ahead of us on this whole type of treatment. This has raised some really, because I go off and I see other projects, this has raised some really good positive things that we've embraced into what we do here. And also some more negative things. This thing of stereotyping, the whole point of social prescribing is very individual. It's very co-produced. It's the person and their plan and what will help them. Some of the projects in England have been swallowed up by the NHS. And it's becoming part of a district nurse's job. It's becoming part of a occupational therapist job. And putting people onto things that will help them is fine. But social prescribing in the way that I do it, or we do it in Swansea, is slightly different to that. So the different types of projects that you will see in England, Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, some are based wholly in the third sector in the community. The charities that have sometimes paid people, sometimes volunteers, and they go out and they find people that need help and they work with them like that. They sometimes don't have too much to do with the GP surgeries, but some do. The NHS, which is what I just said to you about there, they have schemes within their own job descriptions. Housing associations work with people, especially in social housing, to bring everybody together and create a good feeling in the housing developments. There are several projects in prisons as well. Swansea Prison has a sort of social prescribing project. Social services sometimes employ people specifically to go out and try to stop people becoming too dependent or getting to the stage of needing social services. There are people called local area coordinators who are linked to social services in Swansea. They work one-to-one with people in their homes, slightly different to what I do. The idea there is to prevent them becoming to need social services. And then there are various partnerships between the above. So in our project, it's a partnership. It's a partnership between the Cwmtawe GP cluster and Swansea Council for Voluntary Service. So the Cwmtawe GP cluster has 5 surgeries across the Morriston, Clydach and Llansamlet areas. And if any of you know those areas in Swansea, it's about as diverse a population as you could possibly hope for. It's fascinating. It's so different, very challenging, but in a very positive way as well. And on the other side of that, there's so many different things going on in the community. So it's a real pleasure in a way to be the person that sometimes creates a link between them. There's, oh yeah, you should have had my boss today, just telling you this. She's a very clever lady. She's really good with numbers and charts and all that stuff. But unfortunately, you got me, and I'm not so, as you'll see on the next slide. 43,000 patients approximately across the cluster. All right, that's it. That's the limit of my numbers, pretty much. They partnered with Swansea Council for Voluntary Service. So in our project, the GPs provided the money, but I've been employed by Swansea Council for Voluntary Service, SCVS. They support over 1,000 community groups and projects across the Swansea area. There are CVSs all over the UK. A lot of them our one is a charity, and we're governed by the WCVA, Welsh Council for Voluntary Action. So we're pretty okay, pretty governed and all this sort of stuff. So that's what it is. It's a partnership, and it's taken about 8 years for the partnership to come to this area. My boss actually did all the hard work. She used to go to cluster meetings and sit there, and they'd say, so what is the third sector? And gradually, over 8 years, this has now developed into, how can we work together? And Swansea Council for Voluntary Service run a number of projects in partnership with the GP clusters, all up, not just Cwmtawe, all the GP clusters across Swansea. It's really something, and I thank the GP clusters very much. The story so far. Right, now, if you notice the deliberate error on this slide, then I've still got your attention, which I think is pretty good. So the pilot, the 18-month pilot, actually ran till March 19. Okay, so there you go. So I've based these figures on that 18-month pilot. So there's one link worker, who is me, 2.5 days a week. And in that 18-month pilot, I had 130 referrals. It's now gone up to sort of near 150. We started off just having referrals from GPs, and it did take a while to get going. I had to do a lot of work to try and explain what it was, go out and meet the community, or all sorts of stuff like that. But it's really gathering a pace now. We're actually having self-referrals, people referring their brother, people referring somebody down the road, all sorts of things. So there is definitely coming together. During this pilot phase, we've had an independent evaluation because we understand that a lot of you guys work on figures and savings in pounds and things like this. So the evaluation is coming up with a social return on investment. So that's a different way of measuring the impact of the project. I think it's going to take a while because it's still really embedding, but fingers crossed. So these last three here are really coming out of the work that I do one-to-one with people in the surgeries. So I'm going to get to the bit about how this all works. But by listening to them, we came up with some ways to develop the program to offer taster sessions of things that they want to try, but they don't feel confident enough to go out to a mainstream class. And we were very lucky that the GP cluster gave us a little bit of budget for this. So one of the things that came up, or the three we've gone on with, is yoga, mindfulness, and seated yoga. The yoga was what everybody said they wanted, but when it came to it, it didn't go quite as well as we thought it would. And so when we talked to people about why they signed up and then didn't go, they felt intimidated, even though, I said, oh yeah, I'll be there, and it's all going to be lovely, and the teacher is really nice, and you're just going to lie on the floor, and it'd be really easy. There was this barrier in quite a few people's minds. So some people came, but it wasn't as much as we hoped. The mindfulness, we did one-off hour and a half, 2-hour taster sessions, and they were booked straight away. People were very, very keen to just come and find out a bit about it. And from there, we signed up enough people to fill a 6-week course, which again was great. The third thing, the seated yoga, was really patient-driven, right? Patient-driven, with me putting in a few suggestions, and that's been a real success. I mean, I heard the end of the Valley presentation, and their numbers are mind-blowing. I mean, ours are much smaller than this, so, all in perspective here. But the seated yoga class, we did some tasters. We put on 2, and then there had to be 4. That then turned into a class, which became so popular, they had to start a second class. The lady that teaches it is actually 65 herself, and she's saying she's got to draw the line here somewhere. But we've really captured something, particularly in Morriston, for seated yoga. And it's actually become self-sustaining, which is a huge thing for us as well. So we've set them on their way. We've got some more stuff coming up. But, when I'm in the surgeries, people say, she's only here for like half the day. We see 25 patients in a day. She only sees a few. Well, actually, I only spend about 40% of my time in the surgeries seeing patients, because a huge part of my job is creating connections in the community. Because if you think of it, my job is giving people information about what's on in the community. You have to make sure, that what I'm telling people about is a proper session, that it's being run properly, it's got the right insurance, it's got the right qualifications, and also that the people running the community groups are able to accept and to look after not only themselves, but the people that are coming in. And that's a big part of my job that doesn't always get reflected in the press. So I do an awful lot of work in the community, and linking the patients and the community often brings up some new ideas, which I'll get to as well. Right. During the pilot, apparently, and you've got to remember, this is just me now, right? 2.5 days a week. Yeah, so the numbers are small. I do my best. I linked people with over 60 different groups, activities, training, whatever. So that highlights the number of opportunities there are for people who live in these areas. And just think where you live. How many groups and activities are you aware of within your own community? So, moving on to the community side of things, what I often find is that the people that come to see me, they say, I quite fancy going to this or trying that. So you say, what's stopping you then? And there's often, as you know, barriers to overcome things. So I see my job really as just like listening and hearing where those barriers are, and hopefully removing them, but at least showing people how they can overcome them. As I say, we've talked about co-production, but social prescribing is a very empowering thing. It has to be. We want people to become more responsible for their own health and well-being, and that may make the strain on primary care in particular a little easier as we go along. Since working in the GP surgeries, I've learnt so much. I really never... You hear people talk about the number of frequent attenders, people that use the surgery as a social place to come. And I've heard that, but it wasn't until I actually worked in the surgeries that I saw it, and it's quite humbling, actually. The sort of things that you guys and the GPs have to deal with, and in your 10 minutes or 15 minutes slot, it's quite hard to get to the bottom of some of those types of people's needs and why they use the surgery as a crutch. So I'm very lucky in that my appointments are 45 minutes, and people can come a few times. But so we tried to do a few sort of halfway houses where we set up things like this wellbeing walk. So it literally goes as fast as the slowest person, and my job is to go in and get everybody chatting and connecting with each other. Because I have sat in a surgery, say I had 4 people in one day, 2 of them lived in the same street, talking about being lonely, and I wasn't allowed to, because of confidentiality, I'm not allowed to say, there's a lady that lives 2 doors down the road, you two get on like a house on fire. So we try and make these sort of halfway house type activities where we can bring people together and I can encourage them to talk. So hopes for the future. going to be that we expand across the other Swansea clusters. So we need some funding for that. So hopefully that will come. Develop volunteer and peer support opportunities. So people that are nervous of going out and finding and sort of walking into an activity, will have somebody who's been through something similar to help them in. We're working with more partners all the time within the NHS and the community. I've just been contacted by a lady from EPP, which I always think is expert patient, but it's not. It's educating patients program. What they do is fantastic, so I'm going to be working with her a bit. The exercise referral scheme is really good as well. We work with them, and lots more going on in the community. We are partnered with the new Clydach Men's Shed, which is hilarious in the best possible way. Trying to get a bunch of men to organise themselves is challenging. They actually have admitted they need at least one woman, otherwise they won't do anything. Age UK have approached us, and we're about to start a Gwanwyn club, which, if there's anyone from Aberystwyth here, you have a flagship Gwanwyn club up there, which is a creativity club held once a week for older people. Older people apparently is over 50, so I've got a few years to go. Not. I was quite shocked at that, but there we go. And we do everything we can for co-production as well. So some people like the Stevie that spoke earlier, get involved in their health in quite a life-changing way or a policy-changing way. So we promote that as well. And to do more things like this. We have a lovely film that we made about a lady who actually suffered for quite a long time with depression attacks. So she would have phases of them. And she was very sceptical about social prescribing, but thought she'd give it a go. And the skeptics are great to work with, because they're the ones that give you the best feedback. So I got her to try yoga, actually. She went to University of the Third Age class. So she was amongst people of similar age, which is another big barrier to yoga. People think it's, young, alive, bendy folk. And it isn't always. As an ex-yoga teacher, I'm obviously a good example of that. So she did really well, and I'm not telling the story as well as she did, but basically we sold her on it, and she's very keen. She's spoken at a steering group meeting for our Ageing Well project run by Swansea Council. She gave permission for the Arts in Health programme to make a film about her. So as I got you on the well-being theme now, just to go back to that, get back to the well-being theme, the quote that you've probably already seen is not meant to it's not meant to put you out of a job or anything. I think it speaks quite well for the well-being aspect, in that thing of there not being a pill for this. So no medicine cures what happiness cannot. And that's sort of what I try to do in my job. As I say, I love my job very much, and my background is in complementary therapies and holistic care. In the Cwmtawe cluster, there's 5 surgeries are very, very different and individual. So one surgery I work in particularly for the last year, the New Cross surgery in Morriston, has a fantastic holistic view of their patient's health. So they've got a paramedic in the surgery, they've got a pharmacist, they use the nurses, they've got me, they've got the mental health nurse, and it's very much seen as a package. And that's more than I can ever hope for, because I never thought that I would be accepted so much in a GP surgery. Unfortunately, the cluster have just decided to change the way they work. So I've been booted across the road into the clinics section now. But it was a great year, and what I believe the potential for social prescribing in Swansea and Wales could be. So thank you very much for listening. I can't believe that time went so quickly. That's it.